The global broadcast was meant to be symbolic, a peace summit between the West and Africa, held in Geneva, Switzerland. Presidents, generals, and diplomats from over 50 nations filled the shining studio stage. Cameras rolled. Every second was live. U.S. President Donald Trump, invited as a strategic guest, had taken over the mic mid-discussion. Then it happened. He stood, walked toward the center, and locked eyes with Captain Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso. His voice thundered across the studio. "Salute me." A hush fell. Journalists froze. Interpreters stopped translating. The air thickened. Traoré blinked once. He didn't move. His hands remained calmly at his sides. The camera zoomed in. Trump didn't flinch. "Salute me, young man. That's how power works." A soft gasp came from a French ambassador. A UN interpreter shook her head, whispering something in disbelief. Traoré slowly took one step forward, staring directly at Trump. Not with anger, not with fear, but something else. The world was watching. Twitter began exploding. And then, he did something no one expected. Captain Ibrahim Traoré didn't raise his hand. He didn't blink. He didn't even speak. Instead, he simply stood straight and closed his eyes. For 6 seconds. The silence on the global broadcast felt like an earthquake. 6 seconds. That's how long it took for world leaders to begin whispering. Journalists typed furiously. Hashtags erupted. Traoré vs. Trump trended in 14 countries within minutes. Trump, visibly irritated, stepped closer. "Don't play games with me," he said, loud enough for the mic to catch it. Traoré opened his eyes and finally spoke. His voice was low, controlled, almost too calm. Respect is earned, not commanded. The room cracked open with murmurs. Even some U.S. allies looked away, ashamed. The president of Namibia lowered his head. The South African rep smiled slightly, just for a second. Trump's jaw clenched. The studio producer flashed a red light. Time was running. But nobody dared cut the feed. Traoré didn't flinch. He stood taller. The world had expected a fight. But what Traoré gave them was deeper, more dangerous. He whispered something to Trump. Too quiet for the mic. But whatever he said, it made Trump's face drop. Trump's smirk was gone. He leaned closer and barked, "What did you just say?" But Traoré didn't repeat himself. He turned to the cameras, now broadcasting to over 92 million live viewers. Then he spoke, directly to the world. "This is not about me. This is about every African child watching, wondering if dignity is only for the powerful." The room fell into a painful stillness. A woman in the audience wiped a tear. A young black journalist in the back dropped his pen. Twitter was on fire, with mixed reactions. Some called him arrogant, others called him brave. As Traoré sat down, he reached into a sleek black folder under his chair. The camera caught the moment. The crisp sound of paper against leather echoed faintly. Trump noticed. "What's that?" he snapped, suspicious. Traoré didn't look up. He carefully pulled out 3 documents, not classified, not threatening, but powerful. The moderator leaned forward. "Captain Traoré, what are you showing us?" Traoré held up a photo. It was a picture of a muddy primary school in Burkina Faso. No roof, kids sitting on bricks, one chalkboard, no shoes. "This," he said, "is why I came." Another paper showed a girl named Adama, 12 years old, who walks 9 miles daily just to learn English and math, using torn notebooks from a trash heap. Then he showed a printed tweet from a Western leader. "Africa needs to help itself before asking us for respect." Traoré looked up and said calmly, "We do not ask for pity, we ask for honor." A tear slid down the moderator's cheek. The room was frozen. Even Trump didn't interrupt. Outside, millions stared at their screens, hearts cracking open. But Traoré wasn't done, not even close. Traoré's voice dropped lower now. So low the studio leaned in. When I was 9 years old, he said, my village was attacked. Not by terrorists, not by rebels, but by silence. Our well dried up. Aid trucks never came. No help, just silence. His mother, he explained, used to boil water 3 times, not to purify it, but to trick the children into thinking dinner was coming. It was just water. The camera zoomed in on Traoré's eyes. They didn't blink. That's when I learned. Silence is deadlier than bombs. He paused and looked directly at Trump. So when you tell me to salute you, what exactly am I saluting? The silence or the history of neglect? Gasps echoed from the back row. A U.S. diplomat lowered her eyes. The African Union rep stared into his hands. Twitter was now flooded with the words, Ibrahim just broke the world without yelling. A single mother in Detroit tweeted, I never cried during a political speech. Until now. But what Traoré did next didn't just shake emotions. It changed something. Inside Trump himself. Traoré folded the papers and placed them gently back in the folder. Trump leaned in, his voice sharp again. You think you're special because you gave a speech? The cameras didn't catch what happened next, but a mic left on did. Traoré stood, leaned slightly toward Trump's ear, and whispered just 7 words. Your grandson goes to school in peace. Trump's face changed. As the studio lights dimmed slightly to cut for a commercial break, Traoré leaned back and reached into his uniform jacket. Slowly, carefully, he pulled out an envelope. No one knew he had it. It was unsealed, worn at the edges. Inside, folded 3 times, was a letter written by a teenage girl named Aissata from the eastern region of Burkina Faso. Traoré spoke into his mic. Before I came here, I visited a camp for displaced children. A girl handed me this. He opened the letter and read, Dear President Traoré, please tell the world we are not animals. We are children. We are cold at night. We are smart. We want to become doctors. Please ask the rich people to stop ignoring us. I love my country. Please don't let them laugh at you on TV. Traoré's voice cracked slightly. He folded the letter and placed it on the podium. The world had just heard the raw truth of a forgotten child, through the voice of her leader. Even Trump swallowed hard. What happened next was not planned. It was from the heart, and it broke something deep inside the room. There was silence. Then it happened. 1 clap, 2, 3. From behind the cameras, a group of African students who had been invited to watch began clapping with shaky hands. A few stood. Security rushed forward. Protocol did not allow applause during this segment, but no one stopped them. The clapping grew louder. A journalist from South Korea stood up. A professor from Brazil followed. Soon, nearly half the audience was on its feet, not for drama, not for protest, but because their hearts couldn't stay seated. Trump sat back down slowly, lips tight. His advisors whispered frantically. Traoré didn't react to the noise. He simply turned toward the camera again and said, We are not here to beg. We are here to remind the world. Every child matters. Even if their skin is dark, even if their country is poor. Then he looked directly at Trump and said, You once said Africa was a mess. But I say, it's a miracle still surviving your silence. The applause stopped instantly. Not because anyone told them to, but because their throats were choked with tears. And the most unexpected person in the room wiped his eyes. The camera caught it by accident. A tight angle. A moment that wasn't meant to be shown. But it aired anyway. Donald Trump, blinking back a tear. He quickly rubbed his eye and looked away. But it was too late. Social media exploded. Did Trump just cry? Is this real? Traoré just moved a man who never bends. But it wasn't just Trump. Even viewers around the world and across races, borders, and beliefs were crying. A 17-year-old girl from Texas posted, "I didn't." The moderator, still visibly shaken, asked Traoré, "Captain, what would you say to the millions watching now?" He didn't answer with words. Instead, Traoré picked up a small remote from the table beside him. He pointed it toward the giant screen behind the panel. The lights dimmed. A video began to play. No music, no dramatic effects, just a shaky camera clip, recorded in a dusty village in northern Burkina Faso. Children were building their own classroom, with their hands, small hands dragging bricks, little feet barefoot in red soil. One girl, no older than 8, was using a rusted spoon to dig a foundation line. The studio fell into stunned silence. Trump turned to look. His advisors froze. The screen showed a child writing the alphabet in chalk on the side of a tree trunk. Then came the voice of the girl. "If we build it, maybe one day someone will teach us." The screen faded to black. A sniffle was heard. Then another. Even a U.S. general clenched his jaw, unable to look at anyone. Traoré said softly, "This is the Africa I represent. Not numbers, not speeches, but this." When the lights came back on, Trump stood. Slowly. He walked toward Traoré, expression unreadable. Every camera turned. For a moment it felt like a standoff again. But instead of repeating his earlier demand, Trump did something nobody predicted. He raised his hand and gave Traoré a salute. The studio gasped. The same man who had shouted, "Salute me," was now standing in silence, honoring the young African captain who had never raised his voice. Traoré didn't return the salute. Instead, he stepped forward and did something far more powerful. He placed his hand over his heart. "Respect," he said, "is not in the hand, it is in the heart." Trump said nothing, but he nodded. Somewhere in that moment, the power shifted forever, and the world felt it, not because one man won and the other lost, but because for once, humanity won on live television. Viewers at home started weeping. Comments flooded YouTube. "I can't stop crying." He didn't just represent Burkina Faso. He represented all of us. But there was still one final thing Traoré had to reveal, and it would break the last barrier in the room. As the applause died down, Traoré walked back to his seat, but paused. He turned around and faced the stage again. Then he did something completely off script. He asked the event moderator, "May I bring someone on stage?" There was hesitation, then a nod. Ismail sat silently beside Traoré. He didn't fidget, he didn't smile, he just sat, like a boy who didn't know what joy felt like anymore. The leaders on stage tried to focus, but their eyes kept drifting to the child. A chair for the forgotten had never existed at any summit like this. Traoré placed a hand gently on Ismail's shoulder. His parents were killed by a militia 4 months ago. He crossed 3 borders barefoot, not because he wanted to, but because no one came. The boy's eyes didn't move. "Now ask yourself," Traoré continued, "what does he owe the world that ignored him?" The moderator began to tear up again. Even Trump looked away, his hand trembling ever so slightly. Traoré reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a toy truck, old, wooden and chipped. "This was mine when I was his age. My father made it before he died. I never gave it to anyone." He gently handed it to Ismail. The boy's lips moved, barely audible. "Thank you, sir." And at that moment, half the studio broke down in tears. Even cameras zoomed out. It felt too raw, too sacred. The moderator leaned forward. "Captain Traoré, do you have closing words for the world?" Traoré nodded, but he didn't open a folder. He didn't pull out a script. He simply stood beside Ismail, held the microphone and said, "I came here thinking I needed to speak for my country, But I was wrong. I need to speak for every country that's been forgotten. The audience went completely still. Power is not how many soldiers you have, it's how many children you refuse to let starve. How many villages you keep safe from the rain. How many women can go to school without begging for it. He paused. Some of you will forget this moment. You'll fly home in first class, sip champagne, and shake hands with your lobbyists. But Ismail will still be here, still waiting, still watching. The screen behind him displayed a single sentence, in bold white letters. Dignity is not a gift. It is a right. Traoré placed the mic down. He didn't wait for applause. He just held the child's hand and began to walk off the stage. But just before reaching the stairs, Trump stood up again. Trump raised one hand. The room froze. The summit ended quietly. But the world did not. Within an hour, 21 African countries had released statements calling Ibrahim Traoré the voice of the continent. In Burkina Faso, schools paused their morning classes to play the speech over loudspeakers. Children listened, many in silence, some with wide, proud eyes. At a hospital in Ouagadougou, a nurse showed the video to an elderly woman in a wheelchair. The woman, eyes weak from age, whispered, "That is my son too. Maybe not by blood, but by truth." Social media exploded. Stand with Traoré. Dignity is not begged, as Africa speaks. Now, but Traoré didn't go home immediately. He made one stop, a refugee shelter near Geneva. Dozens of displaced children from Sudan, Congo, Niger, all waiting, cold and unsure. Traoré entered quietly. No cameras, no microphones. He sat among the children, gave them blankets, laughed with them, told stories from his childhood. And then he did something they never forgot. He knelt down and told each one, "You are not invisible. I saw you. The world saw you." And for the first time in years, they believed it. Back in Burkina Faso, the streets were full, not for a protest, not for a concert, but for a broadcast. Traoré's return. People waved hand-painted signs. "You made us stand tall. Even our tears were proud. Ibrahim, our son of hope." A small boy held up a drawing, Traoré holding a child in one hand and a flag in the other. His father cried quietly beside him. But the world wasn't done listening. That night, Traoré appeared on an international news channel. No script,